The Macabre World podcast is brought to you by Darker Art Studio, home of real human bone jewelry. Stock and custom pieces are available, so visit us on the web at www.darkerartstudio.com and show them your darker art side. Macabre World, a podcast from Darker Art Studio, where we explore the dark, strange, and unusual from this world and beyond. Hello and welcome to the Macabre World podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Digati, and with me is the incomparable Nicole Napolitano from the First Street Players. Some of you may know her as Volpe Vetrano of Infernal Opera. And thank you so much for joining us, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, one of the reasons that you're here, lots of reasons, you're cool, you're talented, there's lots going on, is the First Street Players are doing a production of the rock musical Lizzie, written by Cheslik-Demayer, Maynard, and Stevens-Hewitt. What a mouthful. Right? And that's going to be at Tuned Up Brewing in Spring City, PA on October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of this year. And we're also going to have a show a little closer to that show with the cast. Hopefully we'll get some of your cast members and some of your advisors. But tell me a little bit about how this show came about.
So this is one of those shows. So I've done a lot of theater over the last, started in high school, but since 2016, I've been doing a lot of community theater, and have kind of always had this idea of doing, kind of putting on my own productions. I have this sort of cross the world sort of thing with, between like the metal scene and the theater scene. And I've always kind of had this want to do something that kind of crosses those boundaries. And so eventually possibly, doing like my own sort of like theater production company. But this was something where, I was looking for things, interestingly, for First Street Players upcoming season. And I was looking for something possibly for like the November time slot. And I was like, oh, like something spooky could be cool. And was just sort of looking for that kind of show, and came across this one. And the concept really struck me. And I remember thinking like, this might not, just the way it's set up 100% work, for the regular season, but this is something that I would be interested in doing. It kind of fits exactly what I'm looking for. We have that kind of potential metal theater crossover happening. And it's something I felt that I could kind of put together. And so essentially what I wound up doing was approaching First Street, and the now the artistic director, Dee Leach, I presented it to her as a potential fundraiser, and was like, look, I have this show I would like to do, like, something that's essentially kind of my own thing that I would put together and manage. But, I would like to essentially host it through First Street and use it as a fundraiser. And, she liked the idea of doing something offsite and kind of connecting with other areas of the community. And I had worked with Tuned Up Brewing before. I actually did a murder mystery there in the past. I've played music there, with Old Fangled. And so I knew that Clint at Tuned Up might be willing to do something like this. So it was one of those situations where it was something I was very interested in. The concept really moved me, kind of the whole feminist angle, the horror and, the mythology of it. But it just fit so perfectly into all of those little pockets that I wanted to bring together.
It checked off all your boxes.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Exactly.
You're directing as well.
Yes. I have co-directors that are also working with me. So I do have Renee Schultz and I have Alicia Brisbois who are co-directing as well. And then Suki, who she is part of our directing team. She's actually our intimacy director, because the show does have a lot of
controversial, triggering
things. A lot of things that will require kind of some care to handle, both as someone being part of the show and seeing the show. So she's part of that directing team as well.
Now, we have listeners that obviously are from all over the country, and I'd like to think all over the world. I have my cousins in Portugal. That's who I'm counting. Mm-hmm. And they would know you as Volpe Vetrano from Infernal Opera, which is still on Spotify and some of the other streaming services. The Avenging
one
Phoenix
of the albums.
is definitely something to take a listen to. So if you enjoy harder rock, I'm going to call it metal because I'm woefully under genred when it comes to this kind of thing. But the thing is the one of the things that struck me is the music in Lizzie. Now that I've heard it all the way through, because my better half Steve who's also formerly of Infernal Opera as the bass player, is going to be in the orchestra for Lizzie, and so are several alumni of Infernal Opera. You've got kind of recreating a theme. The music is very much in that same vein.
Yes.
And I think
very
that,
so.
Not to go too hard on you, but I basically, when I heard it, I said it was written for you. So this is going to be quite a treat to see. Now you talked about some of the themes. We're going to have to get into it. I mean, if you know where I'm from about 6 miles from Fall River, Massachusetts. When my mom's family came here from Portugal, they settled in Fall River. That's very, very close and very near and dear to me. And throughout my upbringing, it was impossible not to have a fascination for Lizzie Borden. And there's been movies, there's been TV shows. There's been more than one stage type production. I think, isn't there a more dramatic
musicals, non-musicals? Yeah.
Right. There's been a few of that. And all of that, and there's so many angles to the case. Have you been studying up on the case to kind of get in her head, as it were, or at least kind of get a feel for what was going on?
Yeah, this is actually, part of my initial interest in this is that I've always, had a fascination with the story. I grew up, kind of in the Hudson Valley in New York, which is, not a far reach from Massachusetts, from the New England area, and pretty part of the New England
some
area.
Of us call that Sleepy Hollow country.
Right, and that's definitely very close to Sleepy Hollow.
You got your spooky gone there too.
Exactly. And so I've always liked kind of spooky stuff, and I've always I like kind of the historic crime sort of stuff. I have a tattoo piece on my forearm of Jack the Ripper. So this is Lizzie Borden is something that I've always been very interested in. And then certainly, seeing the show about her has made me delve back into that old fascination that maybe I hadn't touched as much recently. And what, kind of working on some dramaturgy for the show to basically help give people just some context as far as, the time, and potentially kind of to read into a little bit more some of the subtext of all of this, and also just because I find it interesting.
It's OG true crime.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see, but I think a big part of what has really gotten me and what I've been sort of trying to dig into more is there were things in this show, it's lyrically and everything else, that were very specific and seemed to be phrased in very specific ways or repeated. And I'm like, okay, there has to be something to this, or something kind of would trigger something from my old research. And more as I start delving into this, I'm finding out that there's things that are in the script that are directly pulled from, whether it be, the courtroom,
the trial.
The reports, whether it be, just things that people had said about it in the past, things that, are referenced that, then you kind of dig into it and go, oh my gosh, this is a real thing. They talk about locks on all the doors. They keep talking about all these locking doors. And, I read into it and find out that there was essentially this whole passive aggressive sort of battle at some point where everyone in the family was putting extra locks on their doors just to be kind of spiteful. And so
I've been in the house, and this is something that I think you may find if you look at some of the documentation. You already know this, especially in particular on the second floor. This is weird. All the bedrooms connect. There's no hallway.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
There's only just one exterior landing, right. And then you go from bedroom to bedroom to bedroom to bedroom.
Right.
The furthest and smallest bedroom was the servants' quarter for the maid, for Bridget. And I can't imagine having to go through some,
Right. Or have somebody go through your bedroom and,
to get to their
and
bedroom.
yeah. And that's one of those things that, when they're kind of, building this ambiance and this, everything for this story, that feeling of kind of claustrophobia, entrapment, no privacy, just being on top of one another is something that they really draw on a lot to help, kind of create that tension. And I mean, absolutely, like you're saying, I would imagine that, having people having to walk through your bedroom or vice versa is not a very comfortable feeling, as, especially as an adult, with your parents or your siblings.
The house is relatively small.
Yeah.
The house is relatively small. And what's interesting is a couple of weird things about him and that era. He was stupid Bill Gates rich.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to convert what he had then into kind of comparable to what it is now, he'd be like silly rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
He'd be absolutely silly rich. And it's a very modest house.
Right.
And it was for folks unfamiliar with Fall River, Massachusetts. Fall River, Massachusetts is on the Quequechan River, and it also had at one time had ocean liners coming in and things like that. It's the seat of the Industrial Revolution in New England, although the Slater is up in Carl Johnson. I know you're listening. I'm not leaving Slater Mill out of this. We're just on Fall River night now, okay? So don't write me letters. So what's that, but it's the downtown area is where the mills are obviously all on the water, so that they use the hydropower. So all of these mills are downtown, and all the mill owners lived up a hill into what they called the Highlands. Right. So basically, if you were society, you didn't live downtown, and that's exactly where they lived. Basically, he didn't offer any kind of societal frippery to his daughters, which is how they got to be what was considered to be something of an age and not be married. And everybody kind of like, those weird Borden girls from downtown, we're not going to bother with them. And there was a lot of theories as to who did what. And in this telling, it is Lizzie, and her motive is an unpleasant relationship with her father. I don't know how much you want me to talk about that, because it is an accepted theory, and it's very widely known that some suppose that her relationship with her father was not good. Yeah.
It's it's kind of one of those interesting things, because I know there are a lot of theories as far as who and the why this all happened, and was it actually Lizzie? So and I know a lot of what they talk about that points towards it being Lizzie or someone close to them, and it being possibly related to something like this, is just the level of violence and rage, and that personal, like, typically hatchet someone in the face if it's like a robbery gone awry. So
it does seem personal, I have to admit.
Yeah, it seems a little bit like it was an intentional thing. So they kind of delve into, they sort of build out this story, this tension. It's kind of like the straw, and then the camel's back breaks. And they do pretty early on. And this is one of those things where, when tickets go on sale for this, we're going to make sure people are aware of this. There is, molestation, nothing super explicit as far as, what we would be showing, but molestation and incest, and that being a big part of the ugliness that exists in the household. And then the additional, tension of that whole financial, that miserliness that he had.
He was ridiculous.
It's like these girls, they could have had the resources to do whatever they wanted, and he was holding those purse strings real tight, and also the tension between them and the stepmother, and what's she gonna get versus what we get, and do we like her because she's not mom? And so they kind of build and take a lot of historical facts, and also historical kind of mental meanderings of what possibly could have been, and so they just kind of create this environment of just absolute tension, and there's just got to be a thing.
It's got to come to a head.
What was that?
It's got to come to a head.
Exactly. And so they basically, they set up something that again, historically speaking, I did look into, and it was like, is this something that happened? Was it, did it happen exactly this way, or, was it affected this way? But they do set up this kind of little breaking point. And interestingly, the way they turn it is it's not just the relationship between, the daughter and father here, or, the stepmother. They actually have, so the housekeeper, Bridget, essentially Bridget is almost like a kind of this all-knowing, omniscient sort of, person in this household, which, servants back then, because they were kind of ignored, they did see a lot, and they make that point to talk about how they called her Maggie because, it was the former housekeeper's name, and they didn't bother to learn hers. So she did see a lot, but they actually give her this active role where she is also kind of triggering certain things to happen, whether it be out of malice, whether it be out of self-preservation. There's a lot of different factors that come into play for her as well. So it's, she's involved in that. The older sister, as well, Emma Borden, she's got her involvement where, they kind of show her having more of that financial concern, and also, this dislike for the stepmother.
Well, she actually was the person who ended up with everything. She became executrix of the will. Yeah.
She, so they bring that into play, and kind of, like what role she played and everything coming to pass. And then they also have the characters, this is done with 4 characters. So it's Lizzie, Emma, her sister, Bridget or Maggie, the housekeeper. And then they also include Alice Russell, who was the neighbor. And in this context actually becomes the love interest for Lizzie, which is
another theory that another well, I say theory, but it was relatively well known later on in life, after the murders, after the acquittal, when she was an older lady. She lived in a beautiful home that was in the Highlands. Immediately after this all settles out, those girls booked it right to the Highlands. In fact, the house is still standing. It was just on the market last year, and I believe it sold for $700,000. It's beautifully restored.
Like Maplecroft or something.
Maplecroft,
like
correct.
Yeah.
It is for folks in the area. It's on French Street. It's like 2 houses in from Charlton Memorial Hospital, and it's a beautiful home, and it was the kind of style at the time that they felt they should have become accustomed to. And at one point, Lizzie took up with the worst people in society, actresses. Exactly. And she said to the director and actress,
true to this day.
True to this day, But she had a long, and everybody says friendship. They kind of either side eye you or do air quotes with an actress named Nance O'Neill. Beautiful girl. And so there was, and her sister didn't approve of any of Lizzie's antics, and they barely spoke for like the rest of their lives. I actually met someone who knew Lizzie Borden.
Oh, wow.
I was 17 years old. This is kind of what started the kickoff. And I had told you a little bit of this story before. I had been studying at a summer course that I got into via my good friend. His dad was the professor. And that's where I got a chance to really learn about Lizzie Borden. It was at Bristol Community College in Fall River. And the teacher was Dr. Paul Fletcher, who, through his guidance, I was able to learn so much and get in on a lot of things that I think were big Borden scholar insider tracks for somebody who was just a high school kid at the time, just studying it. And, we did things like forensic investigation in the house itself because they had just restored it. Also, I went to the Fall River Historical Society, and at the time, so I ended up going down to the Fall River Historical Society. Now, mind you, this was in 1986. And at the time, the lady who ran the Historical Society was a woman named Florence Brigham. And with all due respect to the glorious grande dame of history that she was old then. And she actually,
right.
most of the women in your average New England historical society, don't write me letters about this. When you go in there, they're pretty much there. They can remember it firsthand from the Revolution on, and
Right.
you know, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that there's a lot of living history. But I walked in and I was with my mom at the time, and of course she was curious because she had grown up there as well. And so we were in there, and Mrs. Brigham had that typical old New England kind of Kate Hepburn affect, where
Right.
she was like, talked to one of her college manservants and said, bring that portrait of young Lizzie down, please. That's up in the attic. And so this kid comes down and he's got this picture, and it's a relatively famous picture. She's almost in full profile. And at the time, I had real short hair.
Right.
And she said, the resemblance is striking. And my mom took a look at it and went, oh my God. Yes, it is. And she's like, oh, no knives, no hatchets for you. And the funny thing is that Lizzie was about my height. She was about 5'2". She was not a tall lady. And she had blue-green eyes and auburn hair.
Mm-hmm.
So Mrs. Brigham got a big kick out of that. And
Yeah.
later on, I ended up actually playing Lizzie in Dr. Fletcher's play that he did at the Bristol County Courthouse. So I was right there. It was a great experience. So over the years, I've gotten a lot of theories. Now, this show in particular explores that, you know, she snapped.
Right.
And there's some, and I have listened to it both voluntarily and involuntarily while Steve's learning it. One of the things I like, and I think that it's fair to say that Bridget the maid is a little bit like the Greek chorus too. She's going to narrate this for you. She's going to tell you. And one of the things is she says, and this was just the way it was expressed in the play, is that Lizzie is not too bright. Right. And there were theories that Lizzie may have been either a little delayed or just, you know, not the sharpest crayon in the box.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that being said, I wonder, because this crime bamboozled people for centuries.
Right.
Lizzie was the OJ of that era. That was really the first trial that people all over the country, because of the Telegraph, were following in their newspaper every day. It was like people were grabbing that. They were selling newspapers like hotcakes across the country, because via Telegraph, they were getting the updates from this, and from coast to coast, people were following this, just like we were watching that Bronco chase, man, you know, the same way.
At that point, the Bronco would have been an actual white horse, you know.
Exactly. Yes. Very Shrek. But, you know, and so it was this, I mean, everybody had theories. I think one of the things that is interesting is that the more you learn, the less convinced you are of one theory or another. The more you learn, you find a new theory develops, and then you shoot holes in that, and then you find out more information. You get a whole nother theory.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think she did it?
You know, I think it's entirely possible that she, or, you know, or maybe even her sibling did. Just, you know, I know, kind of looking back over this and just, you know, knowing about the time period and about things that came out later, you know, as they were in the trial, because there was just this absolutely, you know, overwhelming, like, you know, kind of like chauvinistic, like, you know, women cannot do these sorts of things. Like, you know, there was a lot of bungling of the investigation. There was a lot of things that were done.
Nobody took it seriously.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was kind of one of those things where, you know, the immediate assumption was, oh my gosh, this poor frail thing. And, you know, she's just lost her parents. And of course, oh, no worries. You know, we won't peek through the house now immediately after the crime. We'll let you destroy the evidence. You know, I think it's kind of interesting to see how much, you know, and of course, forensic procedures have developed much since then, but how many procedures were not followed as they were supposed to, largely because she was a woman. She was someone that was kind of an upper class, you know, even though, like, yeah, they were a little weird. They lived in an area that wasn't typical, but
they knew she came from money.
Right. She had money,
whether it was displayed or used much, they knew it was there.
You know, Caucasian, not immigrants, not, you know, just so because of, you know, who she was just as a person and status wise, and who the family was, it was one of those things where I'd almost believe much of anything could have been done, because how easy would it have been for them to hide this away? And, the way it was just mismanaged because of that. So I think that, for me, like I said, definitely because of that violence. And, as someone that has,
that was not casual violence.
No. And part
that
of
was
what
an axe to grind, if you'll pardon the expression.
Right. And one of the things, so, I talk about us having, having an intimacy director for this show. And, one of our first sessions that we had, we were kind of discussing some of the implications lyrically, and them talking about Lizzie not being the brightest bird. And one of the things we discussed was people that have been abused, especially where abuse begins at an earlier age, can often find themselves stunted, whether, mentally, emotionally, somehow damaged.
Arrested development, very common. Yep.
Yeah.
Typically at the age of the inception of the abuse.
Right. And so, that aspect combined, like I said, it just being so very violent and so very personal, just the, to the face. And the, I think they had said, like, they were pretty sure that, they were dead after maybe the second hit, but it continued,
right.
This was not just knock it out.
19 blows, and despite the rhyme,
right, not being accurate here.
Well, the rhyme's kind of wrong in all kinds of ways. First thing, Lizzie Borden took an axe. They never disclosed any specific murder weapon. There is a handleless hatchet that would have been impossible for anyone to do this kind of damage with, and gave her mother 40 whacks.
Right.
Not her mother, that's her stepmother.
Stepmom.
And and it was 19 and 21 for her and the dad, not 40 and 41. But it was a vicious crime. I am one now. I'm open, obviously. I can't say with absolute confirmation of anything. I am one of the folks that does not think she did it.
Mm-hmm.
My working theory, and I say working theory because you can always change and learn and
change it anytime.
I do not dispute that any of the abuses they very well may have. Something that actually I had heard was interesting is now Abby, the stepmother, the mother was, her brother was John Vinicum Morse.
Yes.
John Vinicum Morse drove a black carriage. It was seen in the area that day
mm-hmm.
when he was allegedly out in Tiverton, which is by car ride in a average traffic day from that end of Fall River, 10 minutes away.
Yeah. And he had been visiting. That was the whole because I believe when Abby was found, she was found in the guest room, and she had been tidying the guest room because he had slept in it the night before.
Correct. And that's not his sister. Point. His sister is their dead mother.
Exactly.
So he's a blood uncle.
He's the maternal uncle.
Right. And there were wags about him and Emma. Having a funny uncle kind of relationship. But but he has an axe to grind.
Right.
Also had gambling debts. Mr. Borden, as stingy as he was with his family, was a little free with the Borden swimmers outside of the marriage, mm-hmm. and had an illegitimate son named William Borden Hathaway. And he was a butcher by trade.
Mm-hmm.
They never did find an axe. What if it was a cleaver?
Right.
Some of those cuts were quite sharp.
Yeah, they to get graphic, but they talk about the father's face, and that his
it was flayed open.
Split. Yeah, just
folks can go online if you are of a mind and see the actual crime scene photos of both Lizzie and Andrew Borden, and of course it's old timey photography, but there's no mistaking that this was an epic decimation of skull.
The very fact, like if you look, and I've looked pretty closely at a lot of these photos, and it's like if you look with any kind of more than a passing glance, even though it's hard to make out detail, what is very clear is that his face is gone.
It's obliterated. It's absolutely obliterated.
There's nothing there. That's why you can't see anything. It's and that was one of those things where, like I said, the kind of looking at, like I said, potentially the uncle or whatever it was, like someone close to the family. But I think that kind of the idea, like in the show, they kind of bring it where there's, multiple people involved and kind of, conspiracy to a degree, or conspiracy after the fact. And, it's interesting to think that like potentially could it have been where, hey, something was discussed with, say, the uncle that, caused him to make a certain move, or, things along those lines.
Put the ducks in a row.
Yeah, exactly. And, whether it be more financial on his end, whether it be concern over, over his nieces, his blood relatives. I think there are a lot of, like you said, like kind of the more you read, like in any direction,
it gets
like,
crazy.
Oh, that's a good point. Because like you think about like, okay, Lizzie being basically our height, her being not a large woman, Emma not much taller.
She was stout though.
Yeah, she had so well, and that's the thing. It's like, she was not, she wasn't delicate, but she wasn't a big woman.
No.
But, kind of then looking at it from the other aspect of like, but then again, if you're in that kind of rage and you're in that situation and
adrenaline is
you
amazing
kind of hit
thing.
that. Yeah. And, not being tall matters a lot less when your victim is laying down,
or as short as you.
Actually,
right? A little shorter. Abby Durfee Borden was only like 4'10".
Yeah. And in addition to that, it was, when they kind of looked at this, the forensics of it, they believe that first hit came when her back was turned and, kind of glanced off the side of the head, and then she fell. So, again, down on the ground, down below you. So you can kind of get a lot more
gravity momentum,
torque when you're trying to do that kind of stuff. Sure. And, the father laying on that sofa, which has been lovingly replaced, restored, if you'd like to have your photo ops, as some of us do.
Yes, been there, done that.
Yeah,
and it's the house has been meticulously restored. They went and spared no detail down to laser measurement.
Yeah,
and making sure. And one of the things that is disputed in some circles is that, of course, Mrs. Borden was murdered first. She was murdered at around 8 o'clock in the morning, and the father came home around 11 o'clock and was dispatched shortly thereafter. So some would say, oh, how could, well, first of all, it's August. Mm-hmm. That's another fun thing. This is gonna actually tomorrow, we're recording this on the 1st. It's gonna release this Friday this week, is the 130th anniversary of the Lizzie Borden, of the Borden murders. But you would think in August that's gonna have some smell to it, right, after a couple hours, right? But then again, I'm wondering, between all of them eating like old mutton, mm-hmm, and having BO, and I think old mutton's going to give you the farts anyway, as they say in Massachusetts, it's going to give you the wicked farts. So, I'm not thinking that was a real fragrant house anyway. So,
yeah. I mean, just kind of thinking back, like you're saying, we have,
everybody smelled.
We have air conditioning, we have air fresheners of all sorts, we have all kinds of cleaners, we have, everything.
They had dirty mutton chamber pots, and
we take showers fairly frequently. That one of the things I know when talking about him being stingy, it was that the house did not have indoor plumbing.
It did not,
even though that was something that was available at that point to people. So, a little bit less easy than even to be clean and tidy. And so I think that's certainly part of it. And then, the other aspect being, well, if, this murder occurred upstairs versus downstairs, and if, things are very kind of, there weren't a lot of open layout homes back then. Everything was very compartmentalized, very kind of boxed away from everything else.
And rooms were smaller than you'd expect, especially in New England, because they were easier to heat in areas, that get quite cold. Yeah, but, there's a contention that, so Mrs. Borden has bought the farm, bonsoir. So when Mr. Borden comes home, he's fumbling with the locks, and he's trying to get in the door because they had all these locks, like, the Mr. Cotter locks on the doors. And then the maid comes and she's fumbling, and she, depending on who you ask, says basically, oh shit, she's trying to get into the door.
Right.
And Lizzie is at the top landing. And if you're looking down at the door from the top landing in that house, to your immediate right is the bedroom where Mrs. Borden lay slain.
Right.
And the big argument is, how could she be at the top of the stairs looking down there and not see the body? She had to have done it because she knew it was there and just didn't say anything.
Right.
And I was in the house with somebody in excess of 6 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, yeah, no, she'd totally see the body. And I said, no, she wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because she wasn't over 6 feet tall. She
Right.
was 5'2". And
Right.
at that same level, I couldn't see past the bed.
Right.
So how she didn't smell it, that's anybody's guess. But
Right.
I definitely can tell you that it's not trickery. She couldn't see it.
Right.
Whether she knew it was there and just didn't look, I don't know,
Right. Yeah.
But a casual glance would not be able to see because the bed was real high, and they put this all together so beautifully at the people should go and visit the house as well. It's a wonderful tour.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things. So, as part of the event for First Street, we're putting together a bunch of different raffles and things that'll be available, to buy raffle tickets at that. And one of the prizes that we're putting together is Dee actually reached out to the Borden house, which is now, you can stay there. It's a bed and breakfast.
Yes.
They also do tours. But they were willing to work with us so that we could kind of come up with a raffle, like our big raffle being a night or two stay at the house to,
Terrific.
to kind of get, so people can go. And that's one of those things I'm like, I want to go anyway, because I've always wanted to, but especially now. And what I do find interesting is, like you're saying, they did this kind of recreation.
Oh, it's tremendous.
And I have heard, like both from you and from other people, just, how great these tours are, and that, they really encourage you to kind of get in there and try and experience and see from all these different angles. And, so if you do have theories and you have done research, and like, you can go and kind of test them out a little bit. You can look at that. You can say like, oh, can I see from this angle? Well, what if I were not looking this way? What if I were over here? And, some
how
kind
far
of
away is the barn? Where is the pear tree?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. If you go there in August, like, all right, well, is it, how hot? Do we think the fresh meat would spoil quick enough to make it so noticeable? And
well, does anybody, and I'm just gonna like debunk like half of New England history here and just say, does anybody even think that sometimes all this spoiled meat and noble rot, like, ergot poisoning, food poisoning, everybody just kind of went bananas, they were just like slowly driven insane.
I mean, I could absolutely see it. And it's,
ergot poisoning is one of the theories as to explain the Salem witch hysteria, which was only about an hour north of there.
Right.
And that's, is that there was ergot poisoning, and that had a lot of political overtones, and that's another show, kids. But Lizzie, but it's it's almost hard to figure out who wouldn't kill him if they get the chance.
Well, and I think that, kind of, again, just looking at the environment at the time, especially for people that were considered kind of more high society, one of the things that was mentioned in interviews with the housekeeper, and that is mentioned, throughout the show, is this whole, it's like no one ever yelled at each other. Nobody argued. There was never, even though there were tensions, nobody screamed in anybody's face. It was just a very passive aggressive, repressed kind of. And as anybody that has ever had to, adult in a situation where, maybe they're not the happiest camper dealing with who or what they're dealing with,
right?
You could be subjected to something for, a couple of hours and have to keep your trap shut. And it works on you, you kind of start
that
getting,
builds up cumulative stress. Sure.
Yeah. And so, you have this situation where you have a group of adults living in a smallish house, right on top of each other, no real privacy, no real, separation,
eating spoiled meat.
It's hot. We have no indoor plumbing. There's no, and just this constant back and forth, passive aggressive kind of, stifled environment. And it's just, like you said, like, how do you not kill someone at that point? Like, how do you not kill somebody
You wonder, yeah,
in a situation like that, let alone somebody that, you're pissed at for one or a million reasons. And, if you look at it as, yeah, maybe there was abuse, or even just look at it as like, you SOB, like you're having us live in this, like this cesspool, this hot, plumbingless house
right.
in this crappy, this area that we don't want to be in. And you're doing it for what? It's like, so even that, like, like
He
it's
was
hot, it's
noted to be
humid.
worse than just a miser. I mean, he was a miser, but and I loved that this was in one of the lyrics, that he was previously an undertaker.
Yeah.
And he would actually break knees and feet to cram them into coffins that were smaller to save money and,
Right.
and collect more profit.
Yeah.
And it was, he was ruthless. He was shrewd.
Yeah.
And, whether or not he was inappropriately handling his daughter or daughters,
right,
is a possibility. It is proven that he handled out people outside of his marriage. His wife dies. His turnaround on remarrying was quite swift.
Yeah. 2 years, right?
And yeah, and it's so it's just,
well,
he's not a nice man.
No, and there really was, and again, this is something that's repeated in the show where they talk about, like, somebody will do something. I'm afraid something's going to happen, because there really were concerns from people outside of their household, because he pissed a lot of people off.
Yeah.
And there really were like, oh my God, like, somebody's going to come and like, harm him or harm us because he's a jerk, or he's cheating people, he's screwing people.
All the above.
And everybody's living in hot, humid August right then and there. So it's like,
and for as cold as New England gets, we get as humid as anywhere else, or
absolutely.
Sun, which is why the roads are such crap, because like it's like -20 in February, and then it's 105 degrees in August, and then the road just goes, oh God, and cracks.
Yeah, can't do it.
So the music in this show really fits the intensity of the story, I think.
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of different influences. Let's talk about the folks who are in the cast briefly, because we're going to have everybody on, or anybody, as many as we can get for our show right before the show. But tell me a little bit about who's cast and where they come from.
So as I said, the cast, the characters, there are 4 characters in the show. So it's 4 women that are, part of this, kind of 4 singing sirens here. So so as you mentioned, I have been frontwoman for a dozen years of Infernal Opera. So I'll be playing Lizzie. We did kind of that traditional heavy metal. I've also done a lot of theater. I do, an acoustic duo called Old Fangled. So a lot of different, I listen to everything. That's always fun. But so our Emma, our older sister, Emma Borden, is being played by Melise Weber. So Melise, I met her through theater back in 2017. I did Mano La Mancha at Forge Theater, and I met her there. And she's an incredible, she does voice lessons now, music lessons. She used to be a professional opera singer. So she kind of brings, she's never, done rock or metal. Like, this is kind of part of the creation of this cast and crew and band for this was everyone is bringing different experiences, and has different strengths and different things that, I hope they'll kind of grow and learn in ways from this. So like, she's never done rock or metal, but she has this incredible opera and theatrical background, and, just an absolute powerhouse in all that she does. Our Bridget, or Maggie, our housekeeper, is being played by Dee Leach, Deanne Leach. So she is the current artistic director at First Street, but she also has done a lot of theater. She's a director, she's an actor, great singer as well. She also, she hasn't necessarily done, like metal or anything, but I've heard the woman sing from the great, American rock songbook. She's killed some Journey and some.
Well, that's where it starts,
Yeah, and and she has a love for all of that kind of music as well. And then our Alice Russell is being played by Barbara Blackthorne, who she is the front woman of the band Empress. So Empress is a symphonic metal band based out of Philly. And she just has this incredible range just vocally. I mean, these beautiful, just soaring, operatic type vocals, but just this power as well. And she's done some of the more aggressive stuff. And it's this really cool combination of personalities, of voices, of backgrounds, just, in these four.
It does well to mention here, if we're talking about Empress,
Mhm.
and everybody should give them a listen because they're amazing.
Absolutely.
In the pit, we have.
Yeah, we have so kind of continuing that theme of, kind of bringing in from all areas and kind of crossing these little areas in my life. So Vlad Kovin is one of our guitarists in the pit. So it's a 6-piece, rock metal band. So he is the guitarist and kind of fearless leader of Empress. I met him when he played with Infernal Opera.
Right.
As you had mentioned, it's kind of like a little bit of an Infernal Opera reunion. And what I learned just recently, so years ago, talking about photo ops at the Lizzie Borden house, you had gone with Steve to the Lizzie Borden house.
Yes, indeed.
Bass player in Infernal Opera and bass player currently in Lizzie.
Laying on the couch.
Laying on that couch, wearing an Infernal Opera t-shirt, getting hatcheted by Mom.
But my mother at the time, who was 87, my mother is holding the hatchet over his head, which I thought was brilliant.
I remember just kind of poking around. I was trying to figure out, I was like, how long ago was this? It was one of my insomnia things, like 3 in the morning. I'm like, oh, let's just find out. And I found a post that had been
September 2016.
Yeah, and the lineup of Infernal Opera at the time, the 2 guitarists and the bass player matched the lineup for Lizzie. So
it's all coming full circle, isn't it?
Right. And that wasn't I mean, it was like, in the Infernal Opera reunion thing was like, yeah, but Infernal Opera has had so many lineups. It's like, it just so happened to work out this way. And so basically, Vlad now with Empress, and they've been putting out some great stuff. And like I said, if you have not checked them out, definitely do. They have an album coming out this August 19th. So check out the videos and all that. But so we have him on guitar. We have, as we said, Steve Rimmer on bass. So he
from Seeds of Perdition and formerly of Infernal Opera.
Yep, and also
Long Tall Sally.
Long Tall Sally as well currently. So we got a little bit more of not just metal, but some blues in there, which is great. So Steve as well, and then our second guitarist is Jolly Piacentino. So he was again in Infernal Opera at the time. He also had previously played in Sick Trust. He had played in Burned in Effigy. Yeah. So he's kind of been a fixture in the metal scene for a very long time. So he
scoped some heavy hitters. You really did.
Yeah. And it's we actually have so those were like kind of my 3 metal pulls. And then we have Nate Patton, who is the music director for the show. He's also our keyboard player for the show. So he's kind of the managing director at First Street. I met him through there. He's kind of helping get this all arranged. So he's got this great, he's a music teacher as well. So he's got that kind of great background. We have Jeff Sherman on drums, who again, I met him through theater, and he is someone that he's played in a lot of pits over recent years, as far as drums with all different kinds of theatrical ventures. He just played in Guys and Dolls. We'll be playing in Xanadu at Forge this September. Xanadu, the musical. So in case, but so he has an absolute love for for rock and metal and for like 80s stuff, and just so he's kind of got while he hasn't done so much of the playing in this kind of a band, like he's got that love for it as well. And then we also have a cello player, Jeremy Mitchell, who it was kind of just, he was the only person that I did not know personally as far as getting involved in this show. I had someone that, I was hoping would be able to do the cello, and they weren't able to do it. And I had shared information about the show. and had noted that we did not have a cello player, and a friend shared this information, and he saw it because he was friends with them and had done a little shop of horrors with them. He was like, hey,
Right.
again, he was Audrey too in a production of Little Shop of Horrors, and he's like, hey, I play cello. Do you need a cello player? And it wound up working out perfectly. And
That's
he
kind of amazing
came,
because those are sort of thin on the ground.
right, and the best part was he came to a first rehearsal and got his script, and starts playing along right off the bat, which is amazing. But we're having a conversation. He's like, interestingly, I was, for a lot of years, I was in a rock band based out of, Fleetwood, Pennsylvania. And I'm like, boy, are you going to be excited when you hear about the rest of this pit? Because, we absolutely have, that kind of background. And then something that is not typically done with this show, that I decided to do is I added in a Mr. and Mrs. Borden as like actual live people for this show. And, in this context, they're essentially kind of these spectral sort of beings, these kind of this overbearing presence here. And they are played by, so Mrs. Borden being played by Liz Fry, who is another person that I met through First Street. She's actually our house manager now, but she was in Little Prince. I met her when we did Rock of Ages. She's got this incredible talent. I mean, she's just so good. And so she's going to be playing our very, very judgy kind of spectral Mrs. Borden. And then I have Matt Lake, who Matt is someone that I met, is a legend. I met him years ago, and I think it was 2018. I assistant directed Dracula at Forge, and he was one of our Draculas. He was our older, younger Dracula, more revived Dracula, depending on, how you look at it.
Dracula number 3.
And he is just this like super tall, like what is he, like 6'6". And he's got this very kind of deep, soothing sort of voice. And he's got this, this English accent. And he's one of those people you could just listen to talk as whenever. But he also has, as friendly and kind as he is, this knack for being absolutely creepy and terrifying. And I'm like, if there's going to be anybody that is just an overwhelming presence as Mr. Borden for these women, he would be the one to do it. Yeah.
Well, the physical presence doesn't hurt, even though Andrew Borden himself wasn't especially, he was actually pretty average build wise, but his personage is large. Right. And I think that's a great way to reflect that.
Yeah, I think, because that's the whole thing, because kind of, they are not so much truly written into the script, but the way I wanted to create this was, this constant, oppressive presence of both of them being in this house, being on top of everyone, larger than life, and kind of not, the audience not necessarily being 100% sure, do they exist really? Are they in their heads? Is this just, in a memory? So, just to present that sort of feeling that, may have also been existed there.
So much talk about the trial and so much talk about did she or didn't she, that sometimes I think getting into the minutia of that, people forget there were 2 victims.
Right.
There are 2 people that were murdered. I mean, and he might have been a right bastard, and I don't doubt that he was. And she certainly sounds like she's, pretty awful. So, I'm sure that they were horrible people, but that doesn't excuse
well
them being flayed in their own home.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of those things where it's like, it being such an old case, we're talking about 130 years on the force, right?
Correct.
That's a long time, and that has a way of kind of dehumanizing things. But really, these people were, ruthlessly murdered in their home. It's a terrible, and I think that loses it along the way.
So I love that you're putting that imagery there, because people are going to remember that.
Yeah. I mean, they absolutely, they were real people. And so, kind of wanted to bring that in, and obviously just getting to work with more awesome people. And then, like I said, I have this, this directing team that is incredibly experienced, just, so much knowledge. And I mean, for me, my directing kind of started back with Dracula. So I don't have a lot of directing experience, and this would be my first musical that I'm directing. So to have No,
You got this. You got
I have,
this.
but I have, you know what? I have a lot of talented people that are going to help me with this. And said I have Charles Truxell, who is our tech director at First Street, and he is going to be helping us with sound. He is, helping kind of design lights. I mean, he's a whiz at this kind of
Now the
stuff.
venue's a little unusual. It's not at a theater.
No, it's not at a theater. It's so Tuned Up Brewing. Clint Tishnell is the owner there, and he is a musician himself. He is an incredible guitarist, drummer, bassist. Like he could just pull an instrument down and play it, and he's amazing, and he can sing. And
Awesome.
so he owns this awesome brewery in Spring City, and he brews the beer. And when they first started, he was cooking all the food. Taught the self-taught chef. I mean, just and he is someone who has always been so incredibly supportive of the arts and of music. I know he does fundraisers for the local library. He's done, the murder mystery did was a fundraiser for Forge. The
Right.
This being a fundraiser for First Street. And he is so enthusiastically supportive of, he has music there all the time. He has open mics, he has blues jams. There's always something going on there. And he has that love and appreciation and wants to support that. So it's a great partnership there, but it's also the venue, while, not one that you would typically see for theater, he has set up, this great sound system. He's got a back line there all the time. People are always jumping up and playing or doing, whatever they're going to do.
I've been
So
in the place. It's huge. It's like an airplane hangar.
yeah. And it's like you go in, and it's interesting because it's like kind of a long, narrower space. And you first walk in, and there's the bar there and kind of a long seating area. And then there's another room, which is kind of like the dining room. And that's where we will be and where music will be set up on any given night. And so we're going to set it up interesting. It's kind of like a dual experience where there will be tickets available for kind of like the dinner theater seating, which is in that room. And then we're also going to have what we're calling kind of like concert general admission seating for the bar area. I'm going to, I think, try and set up a monitor so you have some visual there. But the sound is great. So you could be sitting at the bar, and when people are playing, it's like they're right there.
And it's a static set. It's not something that's going to have scenes changes. The set, I've seen some of it on YouTube productions, is a static set.
For the most part, yeah. Like there
the
are
props change out, but yeah.
Yeah, there's some things that I'm looking to do kind of with a little bit of a kind of a modular set piece to kind of give us some different levels and things, and to kind of create these different environments for the scenes as they go back and forth. But the show itself is very dynamic, and is one that, a lot of these songs flow right into one another. So it's not,
truly,
there's not a huge separation between things. So to kind of keep things moving in that way, the smaller setting actually helps to kind of promote that. It's kind of really does feel like a rock concert and a musical had a baby. It's it's
an intimate story for an intimate setting. I mean, it's a very intense, intimate story.
Yeah, and people will be, when we say right up front, like you're going to be right there. You could reach out and touch us. Please don't touch anyone, but you can reach out, not without consent. But you could basically reach out and touch. I mean, and that's a lot. I mean, really,
look what happened to the last guy that tried that.
Right. But
ended up flayed on his couch.
A lot of these community theaters, like First Street, like Forge, they are smaller just in general. And I know I had some coworkers that have come out to shows in the past. And I remember the one he was like, it's so cool. He said, because you almost feel like you're actually immersed in the show, like you're in it.
It's true. I remember seeing, I had the pleasure, actually, I met Melise not too much after you did, because I saw you both in Manor La Mancha. And it was, so it's going to be at Tuned Up Brewing, Spring City, PA. And that is, even though we're listening to this just on the heels of the anniversary of the Borden murders 130 years ago on August 2nd, 1892. This show is going to be at Tuned Up Brewing, Spring City, PA, October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. For information, folks can go to www.firststreetplayers.org, and that's first number 1 ST, the word street, and players.org, and they're out of Birdsboro, Pennsylvania.
Yep. And we will have tickets on sale starting September 1st, but we'll be putting out updates. So definitely, if you follow on social media, on Instagram,
I hear you're
Facebook,
going to have vendors.
we are going to have vendors actually. So in addition to the raffles that we will be having, we will have Darker Art Studio there.
That's she's talking about me.
Yeah. If you don't know, so the awesome bone jewelry, which I think is fantastic, human bone jewelry.
Real human bones all the time. All human all the time.
I just felt like that would be such a perfect addition, and Rocky was kind enough to be willing to do that.
It's really more like it.
Yeah, and there may be some additional special surprises in partnership with Darker Arts coming from that as well. So definitely keep an eye out.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I think this is going to be a really cool, like I said, we have a local axe throwing place that is donating some passes for us. Like, we'll have
perfect.
Some great thematically appropriate raffles tuned up. Like, Clint is going to have a special fixed price dinner menu available that he's going to kind of theme for the show. He's going to have drink specials, beers, that are all kind of specifically for the show. So it's really exciting. And I'm just so glad to be able to work with so many awesome, talented, knowledgeable people that are willing to just kind of make this magic happen.
So again, mark your dance cards. Now we're talking about it because this is the anniversary of the murder, but this is going to be at the height of the spooky season. Think about those vendors. Think about that atmosphere. Think about the axe murderer. And it's all going to be set to amazing music, which I do not feel I am out of line to say you were pretty much born to sing. So, I think this is something you all want to do. Volpe, I want to thank you so much. There's going to be links for folks to click to be able to get check out the event on Tuned Up, and to get some information about First Street and all of this good stuff. I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and for being willing to, like I said, help out not only with having me on the podcast and having us later, but also partnering with Darker Arts. It's super exciting.
I'm happy to help. I'm all about everybody learning about the busy Lizzie. Busy Lizzie. I'm all about folks learning about Lizzie, and I encourage folks out there to read up. There's going to be a lot of stuff out there, especially at this month, and make up your own mind. She didn't do it. She didn't do it. I don't think she did it. You think she might have done it? Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
remember,
Rocky.
kids, stay kooky out there. Thank you for listening to Macabre World. You can find us on the web at www.darkerartsstudio.com.